2, 1. Welcome in to Locked On Knicks. Alex Wolf and Gavin Shaw here, and we are joined by returning guest Jonathan Wasserman of Bleacher Report. He is their lead scout and NBA draft analyst. You might know him on Twitter as at NBA Draft Was. And if you're not following him and you're at all interested in the NBA draft, you definitely should be following him because he's one of the best follows out there. Gavin, we've already talked about the top 3 players in this draft, a trio of intriguing big men, but now today we're getting into some of the best of the rest with Jonathan Wasserman.
Yeah, Purdue's Jaden Ivy, maybe the most explosive guard in this draft. Jalen Duren out of Memphis. What makes him different than past bigs that went in the top 5, or is he not that different? And is Jonathan Wasserman not all that high on him? Who does he have the Knicks taking? You will find out in just a couple of minutes if you listen, and then some superlative questions about the rest of Wass's board. So all that and more right now on Locked On Knicks.
You are Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome in to Locked On Knicks. This episode is brought to you by Truebill. Truebill is the new app that saves you money by helping you identify and stop paying for the subscriptions you don't want or need, and can even negotiate better deals on those you want to keep. And we want to thank you guys for making Locked On Knicks your first listen every day. We always appreciate being the first guys to grace your eardrums in the morning. We're available on all your favorite podcast platforms and now on YouTube, where if you wouldn't mind, go on there, subscribe, drop us a couple likes. Let us know if you think we look nice on camera or not, if we got faces for radio, whatever you want to say. I don't care. Just, drop a little comment there or something and let us know what you think of the new platform. I'm Alex Wolf. I'm editor-in-chief of Knicks site, The Strickland, which you can find at thestrick.land. And he's Gavin Shaw, your favorite play-by-play broadcaster's favorite play-by-play broadcaster. And again, we mentioned we are joined by Jonathan Wasserman of Bleacher Report. He's their lead draft analyst and head scout. And he dropped some amazing knowledge for us. I feel like, always comes on and does these early primer episodes for us to get us introduced to the draft class. I'm not going to hold us up anymore. We got the best of the rest outside of the top 3 in Wass's lotto coming up right now.
Alex and I, again, just off of highlights, but we were both super into Jaden Ivy. Maybe not quite the top tier athlete because no one is, but I was getting, again, just from watching 5 minutes of him, like some Ja Morant vibes. Seems like already like maybe even ahead of the curve relative to Morant as a shooter. It seems like he would be a fantastic fit in transition for the Knicks with someone like Obi Toppin. What do you think about his game? And it's an interesting conversation around the Knicks, right? Because obviously we're all really high on Emmanuel Quickley. We're all really high on Deuce McBride. But it seems like those two guys are like with Quickley, like there are questions like maybe he could eventually be that lead guard, but a lot of things have to go right there. And I think the Knicks would welcome that surefire point guard of the future.
Yeah, so I don't see Ivy as a point guard, honestly. I see him more as
there you go.
He's become a better playmaker this year, and he did it with USA basketball over the summer, where he averaged like over 3 assists. But he's more of like a spark of energy. It's kind of the same conversation with McBride, but I think even McBride is further along as a playmaker. Ivy is, his bread and butter is just explosiveness, just beating guys down the floor and exploding past them from spot up position and getting downhill in the pick and roll game. He can't shoot off the dribble, which to me is limits him right now as a scorer. And he's just not a natural facilitator, but he's shown that he could be a passer when there's when he attracts a crowd. He can use his gravity to get guys open shots. But again, his bread and butter is to put pressure on the rim and use that explosiveness, because he could fly and he could soar, and he's going to put a lot of pressure on defenses in the rim. And he shot much better this year, but again, that off the dribble, the lack of scoring off the dribble away from the basket, no pull up game, a limited floater, I think that hurts him right now. Although I talked to a scout yesterday who said Ivy's going top 5, and so there's a lot to like about him, and see him jump from his freshman year to his sophomore year, like big improvement. And so that makes you think, well, he can continue to make those big jumps, and that it's not just upside, but it's like realistic upside that he's on track to reaching. So I like him a lot, but I think he's got a lot to improve on to be considered like a lead guard.
Yeah, having seen what Ivy brings to the table, and uh, based off how he compares to some of the guards that the Knicks have and guys that they're building around, like one thing that I've noticed, and this was part of why we liked what Deuce brought in that Houston game so much, with like the even attempting a running into the lane put back dunk or whatever. I think the Knicks have they've clearly prioritized things like pull up shooting um, in the last couple drafts, and in the obviously in free agency, to mixed results. Like Quickly, I think looks really good. Fournier, they spend a bunch of money on him. That doesn't seem to be working super great because they focus so much, I think, in on that perimeter shooting and the pull up shooting and stuff like that, that they sort of forgot like rim pressure from guards. And I don't think that they really have any guys that can do that at the moment consistently. And then we sort of saw that a little flash of it from Deuce, and it's like, oh my God, hallelujah, this is what we needed. So how well do you think that Ivy would fit on this team, given his skill set? Because I really think that if the Knicks could just get one guy that doesn't play like an old dude, like, Quickly is great, but he's always played like, he plays more similar to Derrick Rose than he does John Morant. You know what I mean? Like, and Derrick Rose is, over 10 years in the NBA with bad knees and everything else, but it Quickly sort of plays more like him. RJ Barrett, has about the verticality of like late career Vince Carter most of the time. Like, he just doesn't seem to want to jump up and get those big highlight dunks and that sort of thing. And those plays, as much as they're just flash, like they bring energy, they bring momentum shifts, they make statements, on the court that I think the Knicks are consistently lacking that. So how much do you think a guy like Ivy would benefit the Knicks in that regard?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, to get a guy who can get into the paint, I mean, I guess that's what we thought Kemba was going to do until he was sent to the bench like forever.
Mm-hmm.
But that would be the draw to Ivy if you're a Knicks fan, is like a guy who can just get into the paint and make things happen and have defenses backpedaling. And like, all right, you said McBride yesterday, like we saw something yesterday that was so simple that I feel like I didn't see. It was like when McBride attacked and kicked it out to Taj Gibson for the corner three, like a simple play, but we just don't see it much from the guards. We didn't see it last year from really Payton at all, but to have a guy who can get into the lane, that's going to be what Ivy does. That's his signature skill and kind of what differentiates him.
All right, moving on to Jalen Duren. To me, at least, he seems like basically what the Knicks hoped Mitchell Robinson would be by this season. And Mitchell Robinson, I mean, obviously, unfortunately, has not been that guy outside of the fourth quarter of last night's Rockets game. Every other quarter this year, he hasn't quite been there. But I'm curious what the reasoning is on having him as a top 5 guy. And like, obviously, like we've seen different results from different dudes, and like maybe these comparisons aren't fair at all, and you can tell me, but I've just seen guys like James Wiseman, and to a lesser degree someone like Jackson Hayes, go in the top 10 the last few years, and you're looking at like what qualities a center needs to have to justify going top 5 at this point, when rim runners and rim protectors seem to be a little bit a dime a dozen. And maybe Duren is just so good in those capacities that you say, all right, I want the best guy at those things. But what about his game makes you think that he's worth a top 5 pick?
Well, he's not to me.
Yeah.
I had Wiseman as I think number 12 on my board, and that's pretty much where I'd have Duren right now. I think the draw to him is like DeAndre Jordan, but a better passer, like a better feel for the game, kind of. That's really the selling point, is that he's going to be a very good rim protector. He's putting up like outrageous shot blocking numbers, and he has the body to continue doing that. He's 6'11", 250, 7'5" wingspan. So he's got the body to be a shutdown rim protector and a huge finisher, like a huge target around the basket. Somebody who's going to shoot 60% plus from the field. You could probably get that, in free agency for pretty cheap, or relatively cheap, I should say. So to me, he's not a top 5 guy, but I think he's also one of the youngest guys. He's still 18. I think he'll still be 18 by draft night. So I think scouts are going to look at the body, his physical body, his age, stuff that you can't teach, and that's going to translate quickly, the finishing and the shot blocking, and then say, okay, he's got like the next 3 years to just become, to build on the flashes of passing. The short roll, NBA scouts love the short roll passing, right? Where he does a pick and roll and he catches it quickly and hits the guy in the corner and he makes a quick read in the middle of the floor, and he's shown he could be a smart passer from the post in those short rolls. I haven't seen anything that suggests he's going to be a real post threat or a shooter. And so to me, that automatically knocks him, in my mind, into the late lottery range outside the top 5. But I think scouts still seem pretty intrigued by his physical tools and potential to improve his skill level for a guy who's so young.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. I mean, I think that there is still something to be said for taking a guy that high, but it feels to me the rim running center archetype being early in the draft at this point almost feels like how perception is shifted on like drafting running backs high in the NFL at this point.
Yeah,
Like
totally.
it's a huge risk, but if it pans out, it's great. Like DeAndre Ayton, for example, I think like a lot of people knocked that pick at the time. Of course, you'd probably still rather have Luka Doncic, but like Ayton, I think by and large has proved himself to be a max player at this point because he's figured out the right mix and he's exactly what the Suns need, and he rebounds well, and he defends the rim without getting the gaudy numbers and stuff, but he does a good job of deterring things, and that's like huge for the Suns and why they're like one of the title favorites again this year on top of everything else that they have going for them. But yeah, it feels like Duren and anybody else is just kind of like it's like a huge shot in the dark in that way.
Yeah, just comparing those two guys, like Ayton is so much better offensively than Duren at this point. I mean, I think the only guy you compare Duren to really is like a better passing DeAndre Jordan, and yeah, kind of like running backs, like they're kind of replaceable. You can get them for cheap somewhere else. So I just recently wrote an article, and it wasn't supposed to be negative, but as I was writing it, I was pretty much saying like he's, of all the big names, he's the most vulnerable in my mind to slip down boards.
All right, let's take our first break and talk about Truebill. Do you know why free trials renew without your consent? It's a business scam out to get you. Don't let greedy corporations pocket your money. Download Truebill to take control of your subscriptions. Truebill is the new app that helps you identify and stop paying for subscriptions you don't need, want, or simply forgot about. On average, people save up to $720 a year with Truebill because companies make subscriptions hard to cancel. Truebill makes it incredibly simple. Just link your accounts and Truebill will cancel your unwanted subscriptions in one tap. And your Truebill concierge is there when you need them to cancel unwanted subscriptions so you don't have to. Truebill has over 2 million users and helped them save over $100 million. So don't fall for subscription scams. Start canceling today at truebill.com/LockedOnNBA. Go right now, truebill.com/LockedOnNBA. It can save you thousands a year. Truebill.com/LockedOnNBA. And we also wanted to tell you about BetOnline. They have you covered all season long, more props, odds, and lines than ever before. As football season continues, the march to the playoffs, BetOnline remains your number one spot for all the sports action this season. So head to our new updated desktop or mobile website to sign up today and receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Just use their promo code LOCKEDON to receive your bonus from basketball, football, NHL, boxing, and UFC right to your favorite Vegas casino games. Don't wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers available for the 2021 season. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to bet on all your favorite sports. Bet online, where the game starts.
Sorry,
go ahead,
Gavin,
Alex.
I wanted to introduce this next one because I want to declare war on all the parents 19 to 20 years ago that apparently had a huge run on Jalen and Jaden names, because I feel like the last two drafts it's been nothing but Jalen's and Jaden's. But I wanted to bring up Jaden Hardy real quick too, after closing off on Jalen Duren and after we got done with Jaden Ivy. But Jaden Hardy is a guy, he's playing for the G League Ignite right now, which we saw produce 2 high lottery picks last year in its inaugural season, despite all the complications of COVID and everything else. And you noted in your mock draft that he's putting up stats pretty similar to what we saw out of a Jalen Green or a Jonathan Kuminga in that setting. Obviously we're gonna have to learn how to sort of judge these kids that are playing at that level, right? Like obviously there's Scoot there who's killing it, but he's not available till next year. So maybe he's a special case and he might contend for a number 1 overall pick. But you have Jaden Hardy there now, doing pretty well, putting up good stats, but against grown men, against guys that are trying to get back into the NBA, that have been in the NBA before, as well as some of his peers. Where do you stand with him? Do you think that, the biggest thing is his shots just aren't going down right now? He's shooting like, I think it's sub 40% from the field and around 30% from 3. Like if he was shooting 44 and 35, do you think that he would be getting serious consideration for a top 5 pick right now?
Yeah. And he came into the year viewed as a top 5 pick. Like everyone expected him to be top 5. I'll tell you what, he's dropped for me, not just because of the shooting, but like his delivery just looks a little slow to me. I'm having a tougher time picturing him creating separation at the NBA level than I did when I watched him in high school. And so to me, the eye test is a little worrisome, even though his shots aren't falling. And I still expect a top 10 pick or at least around there. But to me, he's fallen just because it looks like it takes him a while to get a shot off. It's got a little bit of a hitch. He's clearly not really a playmaker. He's a scorer. And so that, again, reduces his margin for error because he's not going to add much passing. But his shot's going to start falling. He's too good of a shooter. I just worry about whether he's going to get his shot off easily at the NBA level. I keep seeing Dennis Smith when I'm watching him. And
that's you know who you're talking to. That's a little worrisome.
Yeah, no, I know. And I'm again, we're talking about a 19-year-old in his first 10 games playing again. Like he was playing crappy kids in high school, and now he's playing against like lottery picks from last year. So I'm giving him a pass a little bit, but just my eye test, it looks a little different. Everything just looks a little bit slower with him. But this might all change when he starts making shots at a better clip, and maybe my eyes will come around.
I'm assuming not, because all these kids at the end of the day are hyper confident, and it probably is the best path to getting better. And it's I mean, you get to make money a little bit earlier, but if someone like Hardy dropped, like, let's just say 10 to 12 to 15 spots because of his Ignite season, do you think it could serve as a cautionary tale to some of these guys saying like, hey, if there's parts of your game that could get exposed, maybe you're just better off going to Duke and being a role guy for a year and shining in that position versus, I mean, having all these things highlighted at an early age? Unless
you need that paycheck, like, that's really what it comes down to. Because at this point, like, has anybody even watched the G League game? Nobody even, I don't even know where to find them. It's just, there's like no exposure for the G League. Obviously you get a nice check, but now with NIL, like you can make money in college too. Your games are on, go to Duke. There's a Duke game like on TV every 3 days. And so if suddenly that your stock is dropping with Ignite and nobody knows who you are, you're not like a national star the way Paolo or Chet is, it's going to become less attractive. But I mean, of course, there could be that family who needs that 100K or 500K, depending on who it is and what they offer, which is a ridiculous amount of money, obviously. But yeah, this is, I think honestly, the perception of this program has taken a little bit of a hit this year, just because of the games get no exposure. The players aren't playing great. And it's possible that the big names, and not just Hardy, but Dyson Daniels was a guy who's also playing with Ignite, who was a potential lottery pick. I think his stock is going to drop. And so, yeah, I think they're having a rough year, Ignite.
Yeah, it is kind of weird. Like, you would think that the NBA would be promoting that program a lot more. I feel like they haven't really, that it should be a huge draw. I mean, particularly last year, you had Jalen Green and Jonathan Kuminga, who were both going into the year like top 5 prospects, and to not even really, I just felt like they never really promoted that much. Even when they had that bubble, I would have been pumping that, advertisements for that constantly, like put ads for that, like during NBA on TNT, get people watching this or whatever. And even if you're sticking to YouTube or whatever, just be like, hey, we've got the top, we've got like 3 top prospects on this team. Come watch this on YouTube. Like people watch stuff on YouTube now. That's like a place where people get their entertainment.
And it's like, it's cool. These are like these are like big name prospects playing against like Moses Moody and Kuminga, lottery picks from last year. And these teams all have good young players, like well-known names who are recently lottery picks or first round picks. At this, that doesn't happen. Like you don't usually get to see that, to see a guy like Jaden Hardy play Moses Moody. So it's pretty cool. They haven't marketed it, and it hasn't really generated much buzz at all. And unfortunately, the players this year have struggled a little bit.
Yeah. So circling back to the mock, we saw you had Ty Washington going to the Knicks, and Alex and I both had the same reaction. Oh, the Kentucky connection still well and alive. Obviously, the last few years, or I shouldn't even say the last few years, essentially John Calipari's whole tenure, there's been a history of guards in that Kentucky system who have not necessarily been dominant in college, make it to the NBA. Devin Booker, Tyler Hero, Emmanuel Quickly, Tyrese Maxey, the list goes on and on and on. Is Ty Washington, and not that he's had a bad season by any means, but as you noted, he's having to play off Savion Wheeler, who's a more experienced player, not as good of an NBA prospect. Is there a world where he is a higher level guy in the NBA, or at least a higher volume guy in the NBA than he even is in college?
So it's a little early for me to like jump the gun and say yes, but
yeah,
he's been much better than I thought, and I'd seen him plenty before. He looks like the real. Yes, he's a very good candidate to become, in my mind, that next Kentucky guy who was kind of like held in a straitjacket during his freshman year, and then suddenly he gets to the pros, and you find out he could do all these things with the ball. And so I know that there are some who don't see it with him. But I don't know. I do. I see him. I'm buying his shot, and I think he's a better creator than he gets the chance to show, both for himself and for teammates. So we know the Knicks connection with Kentucky, and I think at some point you have to look at this history of they're always good, these Kentucky guards, right? They're always better in the pros than they are in college. Like I think that's got to mean something at some point. Like you just rattled off all these guys. I had Maxey number 10 on my board. I think he went like 20, 21 or something like that. I just couldn't believe how many teams are just ignoring the fact that these Kentucky guards are pretty good. And to not really nitpick at the percentages and little things that go on in college, particularly when you go to a Kentucky program where everybody's a 5-star guy. You can't do you have to play within the system, and your freedom is so limited. And so, I'm big on Ty Washington. I have him top 10.
All right, we're going to take our second break and just let you guys know that today's episode is brought to you by Boost Mobile. You listen to podcasts for the power of knowledge. You switch to Boost Mobile for the power of saving money. Because with Boost, you get the power of a free 5G phone so you can listen to all the latest episodes. The power of 3 unlimited data lines for $30 a month per line so your family can harness all that brain power too. And the power of one of America's largest 5G networks so you can do it all at the speed of 5G. With all that money you'll save and all that knowledge you'll gain, how much more powerful will you become? Switch to Boost Mobile and find out. You'd be surprised how much some Knicks knowledge can make you powerful if you listen to it over Boost Mobile's airwaves. Get a free Samsung Galaxy A32 5G when you switch to one of America's largest 5G networks. More power to save. Boost Mobile. Quick disclaimers, I'm going to do this as fast as someone on the radio does it. Free phone limited to new customers of 1 per line. Additional restrictions apply. Offers and coverage not available everywhere for all phones or networks. See boostmobile.com for details. Yeah, I'm struggling to think who even the last top tier guard that Kentucky had that didn't pan out in the NBA. I think maybe it was the Harrison twins. It would be as far back as you'd have to go. I mean, they were both top
James
10
Young.
to 20.
James Young was another guy who was the 17th pick.
Yeah. But it's so few and far between, like you said. I mean, they're just so often these the Kentucky guys anymore, and it seems like it's getting more prevalent as the years go on, where they get typecast by Calipari, into the role that they're going to play, and then once they hit the NBA and they get the training wheels taken off, so to speak, then they just go crazy quickly. I also just got a shout out. I love that in your mini profile in the mock on Ty that you said 45.5% on catch and shoot chances, 39.4% on dribble jumpers, and 52.9% on floaters. You clearly know the stats that matter to the Knicks scouting department based off what they look for.
Yeah, that 3-level stuff, the floater game, the pull-ups, shot making versatility, that's what counts.
Yeah, for sure. I did want to let's take Ty Washington out of the equation here and maybe also take the top 5 guys out, because in this scenario that we're assuming that the Knicks end up in the lottery, as I said earlier, there's 30 years of history suggesting they're not going to move up. So let's say that they end up in that 8, 9, 10 range, and let's just remove Ty from the equation there. There was a couple other guys that you mentioned in your mock that I thought were intriguing. There's Johnny Davis from Wisconsin, Kendall Brown from Baylor, who's more of a wing. I was really intrigued by Benedict Mathurin from Arizona. But if you were going to highlight another guy in that general range that you think would be really good on the Knicks, who would it be? And it could be someone that you mocked after Ty Washington too, for all intents and purposes.
So I got to think once again, like eventually they got to find a point guard. I mean, they
Mhm.
keep kind of screwing up. Like, yeah, obviously Rose is helpful, but a guy who could play 30 minutes a game, who could build with for the future. And there's a couple of them who are going to be there in that late lottery range. Gene Montero, who's playing with Overtime Elite, who is, I'm telling you, he's the real deal. He's really exciting. A big time shot creator, shifty, um, exciting playmaker, just a fun guy out there. On the flip side, he's a little bit wild and limited defensively, but we were talking before about a guy who can like get into the lane and make things happen. Like Montero is the guy. And then Kennedy Chandler from Tennessee, who is small. He's 6 foot, but he's got a 6'5" wingspan, which helps compensate. And he's just like your classic true point guard, like your Chris Paul type. I'm not comparing him to Chris Paul, but like that, just like perfect style of play, of like that perfect blend of playmaking, passing IQ, and scoring. A guy who could just totally control the game for you. And to me, if you're valuing point guard traits and skills, like he has them all. He just happens to be 6 foot, but he's also shooting like a really good percentage around the basket. He's very crafty. He finds ways to kind of compensate for the fact that he's only 6 foot, 170. And so I guarantee you that come draft time, assuming the Knicks have a pick in that, late lottery range, mid first round, whatever it is, Chandler's going to be a name linked to the Knicks throughout the whole process. Like, write that down. I guarantee that's going to happen.
Yeah, I want to finish up with some rapid fire questions. Who would you say outside of the top 10, maybe even outside of the lottery, like who is the guy on this draft that you're highest on relative to consensus? I mean, maybe Miles McBride was that person last year.
Yeah, I mean, probably. So, all right, I'll go AJ Griffin on Duke, who he started the year, I think, top 5 for me. And Duke is loaded, and Griffin was injured all last year, didn't play. I know this is rapid fire. I'll try and
No. It takes as much
do
time
this
as you
more
want.
rapid. But he didn't play at all. He was like, I had to write an article a couple of years ago about potential number 1 overall picks who are like, 16, 17 years old. I put Griffin in there. This was 2 years ago. Then he didn't play last year, COVID injuries. And then this year he got hurt in preseason, and Duke is loaded. So they didn't have to play him a lot. He's playing 12 minutes a game. But the other day he came out in 19 minutes, scored 19 points in 22 minutes. He's 6'6", 220, a big time shot maker. Like he might slip in the draft because he's just all potential and no production because he's not going to get the opportunity at Duke. But he's probably one of the top 5 most talented guys in the draft. And I think if you can get him in the 20s or even outside the lottery in this draft, that's just like huge value.
So I think that we've all been, well, okay, I say we all, maybe you haven't been, but I've been at least sort of surprised by how deep the 2020 draft was. After that was, and also how much like potential star power there was in that draft after it being sort of, typecast as this like, there's some talent in this draft, but like we don't know if there's going to be like true stars. It mostly seems like it's going to be deep for like role players, whatever. Turned out there was like a pretty good amount of star power at the top of that draft. It seems like with Edwards, LaMelo working out as well as they have. Obviously, the Knicks found one of the gems and quickly, and then there's Halliburton, that sort of thing. And then 2021, I think we can pretty safely say like the top part of the draft was pretty much every bit as good as expected. We see Mobley and Cade and all these guys having such great rookie seasons.
Mm-hmm.
Jalen Green, even doing pretty well in Houston before getting hurt. Just all these great performances. So that draft has proved to be pretty stacked as well. What do you think that the elite range in the top of this draft consists of? Like before the drop off, I feel like every single draft you say, "Oh, this is an X player draft." You sort of alluded to earlier, that maybe you think this is more like a 3-player draft with those 3 top bigs at the top before there's a drop off. Would you say that are there sort of like tiers in this draft? Like where you think like that, Chet and Paolo, and Jabari are like in the top tier here. And then there's a big drop off before you get to the Jadens and Jalen's of the world, and the rest of them. Where would you say that the sort of lines in the sand are drawn with this draft, and how would you compare it to like the 2020 and 2021 classes?
All right. Yeah, so definitely the top tier is what I said before: Chet, Paolo, and Jabari, and then there's a gap. And then right after that, whether you put in 4 or 5, Jaden Ivy is like the next guy, is one of the next guys for everybody. And then Duren is in that mix too. And then it kind of is like a total a total mess. It could be. I've been at Math. I know Matherin is like in the late teens for another scout. You could do that. I think it just is totally open after 5, and there's a big group of guys, and you could just read the mock draft. Realistically, I could have put them in any order. This early, I'm just kind of guessing right now. You're just kind of putting the tiers together. But outside, it's a total, like Johnny Davis. Like, to some, he's like a potential first rounder. I talked to a scout yesterday who said he's probably going to be a top 10 pick. It's right now, it's just a little early to have definitive tiers, but there's certainly the top one. And then Jaden Ivy is in the whatever next tier, however many guys are in it, Jaden Ivy's in it. And then it's totally, totally open. And how do we compare it to last year's? Like, I didn't think Edwards was going to be as good as he was so fast. Edwards, LaMelo, those guys are studs. Mobley, stud. Cade, stud. I think Jalen Green I'm a little worried about him. With bigs, like this draft is going to be bigs. I'm always curious how quickly it's going to translate. Like, there was nothing that suggested to me that Mobley was going to translate so fast, right? You would have suggested, okay, he needs to get his shot better. He needs to improve his body. He wasn't a very good post scorer last year. So but he's like a star type of impact player already. It's like, how do you predict that? So I think it really comes down to how fast some of these guys are going to contribute. And Chet, I could see him like same thing I thought about Mobley. Like, how is Chet going to come in like right away at 195 pounds and make like a big impact? Paolo, I think without a 3-point shot, I think it's going to take him time to be a little bit efficient. Jabari Smith is 18 years old. Like, I don't know. These guys have big ceilings. It's hard to guess how they're going to compare it to Mobley, how they're going to compare it to Edwards. I think right now the only thing we can try and think about is how quickly it's going to happen.
Maybe someone in the second round, but is there like a shooter in this draft you really love? Because I've noticed the last few drafts, like there's always like that one guy that sort of emerges out of nowhere and becomes like an immediate contributor just because they're elite in that one capacity.
Yeah, I mean, Abaji from Kansas, O'Shea Abaji is somebody who's shooting 40% plus from downtown. Who's just gotten better each year, and he just gives you those 3-and-D vibes. Guy can come in right away, make shots, and defend. And you just say, like, don't do anything else. Just like get out in transition, make your open shots, defend, and you'll play 20 minutes a game as a rookie. And using the eye test on his shot this year, it looks so smooth. And, one of those guys where every time it leaves his fingers, you kind of expect it to drop.
So I guess we'll end, not to end on a negative note, but so let's maybe exclude Duren from this because I think it's pretty safe to say that you're a little lower on him than most people are. Mm-hmm. Is there another player that you find that you're lower on than consensus and have more concerns about than some of your contemporaries so far?
Jaden Hardy, I know we talked about him, but he's definitely somebody I'm lower on. I'm just going to move down the board here. Caleb Houston from Michigan is a freshman who I had top 10 coming in. And now I'm just kind of wondering why I would still have him top 10. And he's a 3-and-D, 6'8" forward. But I'm just not convinced that he's good enough in any one area at this point to get excited about. And, Abaji wasn't either as a freshman, and then 3 years go by and suddenly he's a new player. Like, as somebody who I expect to enter the draft right now, I'm just a little bit lower on Caleb Houston from Michigan than I was coming in.
All right. So on that note, we will wrap this up. Jonathan Wasserman of Bleacher Report. You put out a mock draft just a couple of days ago, so everyone should go check that out. But I know you mentioned another piece. Is there anything on the docket that you can share with people that they can look forward to?
Yeah, my top 50 big board coming out next week and some other stuff, but I'm imagining the top 50 big board is what will interest people the most.
All right. Well, he's dealing with a very young baby. He is grinding out draft stuff way ahead of time. We noted it, but it feels like at this point, it truly is a year-long pursuit. The cycles never seem to end. But John, you do as good of a job as anyone, if not better. So really appreciate you taking the time and joining us.
All right, fellas. Thanks a lot for the time.
All right, and with that, we'll wrap up this edition of the Locked On Knicks podcast. Remember to subscribe on YouTube if you haven't already. Leave us a 5-star review. Really appreciate it. We'll talk to you all soon. Until next time, be good. Peace out.